software program to do that. And one of the things I would like to do is create this part-time position, start out with 200 hours for them to do data entry and being able to put the current participants into this program as well as historical data from the upwards of 300 people that have come through the program over the last 17 years will allow us to track recidivism and also some demographic information that the AOC is requiring now by statute that we track throughout the participants' time in our drug court program. So asking the ability to hire an intern to do that data entry for us.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much.
Entertain a motion to advance this to the full court. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that?
Actually, you're just creating the position. So this part here won't have to go to full court, but the money in budget and finance will go to full court next time. But right now, you are just creating a position and it doesn't have to go to full court.
So does this need to be forwarded to budget and finance?
Well, it's been done a little bit backwards. So it's already been dealt with in budget and finance, but the money's going to be transferred there, but we still have to have the position in order to pay someone.
We're simply creating a line item in the budget through this, and that's what the personnel committee is tasked with. So it doesn't go to full court to vote on. That's a personnel committee issue. We're just creating a line item in the budget.
Okay. I'll ask you to withdraw your original motion. Just restate it as to.
Make a motion that we approve the line item in the budget. Pass this resolution.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Now we'll turn to the front of the packet here. We'll start with the resolution regarding the 2 full-time positions in the 911 PSAP fund. These are part of, I think, the complete package for the Sheriff's Office request. That is the next resolution in here as well. These just come from a different fund. So I'll bring this resolution to the table, and Sheriff, if you or someone from your department would like to address these resolutions, now would be the time.
As you were saying, yes, I did draft and send out 2 different resolutions based on the quorums court ordinance that states each department is to have their own request. And so because the 2 dispatches were paid out of the 911 PSAP fund, we did do a separate one for those 2 positions. But they will, we're asking for an increase of the same amount as our dispatch positions. We already came before the court and did increase their pay a little bit earlier in the year, but this is to add another $500. This would add them, this would give them the ability to get even closer to what their average is on the class compared to the Class 6 counties, and also it would move them 1 stair step up compared to Conway's pay scale as well. So it would give us a more competitive ability between the employer that is within the same building as us.
Any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Justice Boyer, I recognize.
May I ask a question to the counselor? Please. Councilor Murphy, I notice this is a resolution and not an ordinance. But within the body of the resolution, it does indicate that there is monetary value. Typically, we do not use a resolution to include money. The appropriation for money would have to come through an ordinance. Is this a special situation here that we're looking at?
It is a special situation, but first of all, the resolution does not necessarily authorize the payment of money. So anytime we have a disbursement of funds, that has to be done through an ordinance or an appropriation of funds. That's through an ordinance. This is not an appropriation. This is simply a resolution from this committee that would go on to budget and finance and then to the full court to deal with whether or not there are funds available to pay this particular position. So this committee is dealt with the task of whether or not the position is worthy of an increased band, if you will. So that's what the resolution is doing. It's basically a voice from this committee to the budget and finance. We don't have a great way through statute that allows us to do this. We can do it by motion, resolution, or ordinance. We can talk later about why resolution is probably the best method, but it's the cleanest. It creates a paper trail so that everybody can see where it came from, and then budget finance, when they take this up, will have that resolution to look at.
Thank you, sir.
I'll go ahead and ask a question. So the rest of the dispatcher positions are in the second ordinance that we'll discuss tonight, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you want to speak to that second ordinance? I know it's not what's on the table, but they're directly connected. I'd hate for us to discuss one, advance it or cancel it, and not think about the rest of them as well. So if it's okay with the committee, I'd like her to be able to address the other resolution that is on the agenda tonight as well. Go ahead.
Yes, if you don't mind, let me go grab another binder. Last Friday, I emailed out the salary surveys, updated salary surveys, and all job descriptions that I could obtain from the Class 6 counties comparable to our county. I actually had to upload it as a Google Drive document because it's so large to be able to email it to you all. We worked very hard to get all this information and to update the salary surveys. Once we did get the comparable job descriptions from the other Class 6 counties, it did change a few of them compared to what was presented in September. Once we actually got the job descriptions, we could tell if there was any kind of differences. And also based on what was presented in September, I believe, we actually went to the drawing board and looked at what we felt like could be achievable for us, our department, and our employees, and for this county to give our entire full-time employee staff a raise within the 2022 budget. And so with the sheriff's help, our chief deputy, and our patrol lieutenant, we sat down and reviewed it, and we did an adjusted raise request. So this is not the full raise request that we had kind of sat down and discussed and how much it would actually come up to. We shaved off some money off of each of them. So some of them we're getting them right to their average. Some of them are a little bit below the average still. It just depends on where we could feel like we could let it fall at this point, and also try to meet what we possibly can project for our available appropriations for 2022. So this is a conservative request. We did come in and we're not asking for full averages like the original presentation. So, and that's based on all of the data we received, and also trying to take into account how much money we will have available as well. But like I said, I did email it out. I know it's a lot of information to review, but the information is there, and it is completely within reason that every single one of our full staff members deserve their raise, and it is within the comparable averages of the Class 6 counties.
Thank you, Angie. Or Ms. Wolke. Does anybody have any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, just Kendrick.
Ms. Hoyt, what is the total amount of increase that we're asking for with these two resolutions?
So I did update my spreadsheet, and this, I can give you a copy of it if you'd like. I didn't get to send this out, but, the total for just salaries across, because we pay our employees out of, 3 different funds, so county general, and then criminal justice, and then the 2 in 911 PSAC. So altogether, salary adjustments, I believe it'd be around $553,610 altogether.
Okay. I mean, I definitely agree that I think all of our personnel in the sheriff's office does need a raise. I guess one concern that I have, and I don't think this is so much necessarily to be addressed here because it's more of a budget item, but we had a large increase in spending and medical line items that the sheriff said in court that he couldn't absorb within his budget. I know we've had some increase in sales tax numbers, so maybe that can. This is another large increase. We've still got the COPS grant sitting out there that we're not having to fully fund that yet, but we know it's coming soon. So there's a large increase in spending. So I'm in favor of sending this to the budget committee to let them explore to see what's feasible, but I definitely have some reservations about this that I think are going to have to be addressed in the total amount of spending before I can vote for this in full court or within a budget. So I just wanted to state that and throw that out there.
And if I may say, we completely understand that, and we're completely aware of it as well. We worked on our budget very hard for next year, and tried to be as efficient with it as possible, but our department is strongly ran by mandates and laws, and our hands are tied for a lot of our expenses. We try to do our best when it comes to how we budget for them and the vendors and the services that we use, but some things we have to have. And so based on the budget that we did turn in, I believe at this time that the money will be there.
For all the services that Justice Kendrick was talking about?
Yes, based on how we presented them.
The COPS grant, the additional medical expenses?
At this time.
Gotcha, okay, yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Just support.
This is again a resolution, and it includes money. If we send this to the Budget and Finance Committee, Budget and Finance Committee, and they change the resolution, change one item in it, one paragraph, one. You can only change a resolution by another resolution, correct?
That's correct. However, once it goes to budget and finance, we'll create an ordinance that appropriates the money. So it wouldn't, it would use the resolution figures as a blueprint, but we would have to create a new ordinance for the appropriation of the money.
And if the new ordinance is different than the original resolution, does that make any difference?
Well, one, the resolution puts a band up to. So what you're saying is you believe that the position is worthy of an increase in salary. That's what the personnel committee is doing. The budget committee may say, no, we don't have the money to afford that pay band. So the ordinance does not have to match the resolution. The ordinance may say, yes, we understand personnel committee, you want to pay this person $10 an hour, but in our budget, we only have $5 an hour. And so that's what we're going to appropriate. It does not have to match.
This allows it to go into the budget process for the 2022. We can't do an ordinance to change 2022 budget because we don't have an ordinance to change it. So this says you're okay with them making these changes and presenting it through the budgeting process when we start that for 2022. Then y'all can yay or nay the money amount of it at that point. That's why the resolution.
And if there is a change, and piggyback on what Justice Kendrick is talking about here, if the Budget and Finance decides to increase these amounts, this resolution has no effect because it limits the amount that we're sending to the Budget and Finance. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing you say? We're recommending an amount to the Budget and Finance Committee.
But first of all, I'm not sure the Budget and Finance Committee can exceed what the Personnel Committee has established as the pay band. So the Budget Finance Committee may find alternative sources to fund a person, but the individuals, at least as we have it set up right now, this committee is designated as the overseer for establishing the maximum rate of pay for employees. So this discussion is really about whether that position merits an additional salary increase, and it's Budget and Finance that has been tasked with, can the county afford whatever appropriation you decide that the county can afford.
Any other discussion from the committee? I have one question. In all of your due diligence, did any of the positions or did any of the raise request amounts exceed the averages in your research?
Did any of our requests go above the average?
Yes.
There was probably a few based on the fact that if we didn't just round it up a little bit above the average, that it wouldn't have hardly been a raise at all. There's not every single one of our positions are sizably underpaid. There are a few that may only get a couple $100. And so I do know some went above the average just slightly, but I don't have a total amount of which ones that were, but I can find out if you want me to.
I might be curious to know. I can contact you, later, just to see if any are substantially over. Be one interest.
I would say that there wouldn't be any. I mean, don't quote me,
Sure.
but I would say that if any of them go over, it's within $1,000.
So less than 5%, somewhere around there, probably.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But the bulk of it are right at the average or right below.
Okay. Open it up to comments from other justices in attendance. Anybody would like to say anything? Ask any questions? Or the public?
Mayor.
Yes. Mr. Klein.
This is $553,610 was the figure you gave.
Yes.
What's the current payroll for the department?
I would have to.
And I'm comfortable with round numbers here.
Okay. Hold on just 1 second.
As Ms. Woolley is calculating that, just to point, make sure we're all on the same page, just because a pay band has been increased, and just because an ordinance has been passed appropriating money, does not necessarily mean that the elected official is going to max out or go to the top level of that pay band. An elected official may decide that they have a new employee, so they're going to start at a slightly lower rate. They're not going to go to that maximum level. So when we discuss this pay band, just understand that doesn't necessarily mean that all employees are paid that maximum salary. We have a lot of employees that are paid less than what their maximum is.
That's a question.
Yes, Justice Allison, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm new to this. It's my first time venturing in this budget season. But it appears to me that some of the justices that have been here a while seem like this isn't normal. Is this something we've done before, or is there a reason why we're changing the way we're doing things? Because I'm feeling completely left out, with no agenda to look at, with no idea what's going on here, and feeling like maybe we're trying to be circumvented and left in the dark until we have to.
I will attempt to answer your question if that's okay, and if it's not satisfactory, I'll open up the floor to whoever else would like to since you asked other justices their opinion. So, as far as this hasn't been done before, that is correct. So, and what hasn't been done before is putting these in as resolutions. So in the past, we would have done the same thing. Raise requests would come to the personnel committee in September, they'd be debated and so on and so forth. But they would have been ordinances. And that was the advice that was given to us from our prior county legal attorney, was to do it that way. That's the way we did it. But I think with the new guard, we've had different advice, and I have listened to his argument, and for the personnel committee, I think it makes sense. And I think what the argument is, as I understand it, is that doing raise requests as an ordinance doesn't make sense because that would start the budgeting process, right? So when we actually get to create the budget in personnel committee, we'll be putting together an ordinance to pass the new budget, right? And so if we started that now in personnel committee with an ordinance, it would technically be starting that budget ordinance. You with me?
Yeah, I'm just curious, because, I mean, I'm not sure how long Mr. Marcus been here before, but I think that most of y'all have worked under him before, and now all of a sudden you're changing tactics, it just feels odd.
I don't think we've done it this way with your legal counsel in years past. This is the first time that he's been the legal counsel and we've done it this way. And so it's doing it as a resolution. If that's your question as to why are we doing it this way, if you're talking about as a resolution, that's why you might feel like this is a little bit different and things aren't like they have been in the past. In the past, we would have been doing the exact same thing, having the same conversations. It's just instead of this being a resolution, this would have been an ordinance. Justice Rowland?
My question is, as an ordinance, does that mean that when the budget process does begin, I mean, as a resolution, I apologize, as a resolution, does that mean as the budget process begins, and they've kind of got an idea of what these numbers are going to be set at if this ordinance is, if the resolution is passed, does that mean they can bump up the salary
beyond
in the
what's
ordinances, in the budget ordinances?
My understanding is that they cannot exceed what we in the personnel committee pass unless it comes back to us. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And, if you're finished, Mr. Pearson, let me also, I think this is a fair time to kind of talk about the budget process, especially for some of our new JPs. And I don't mean this disparagingly at all, this is just informational. But in a perfect world, there would be 2 times when our elected officials would come to quorum court and ask for pay raises. Those 2 times are set in the personnel manual as April and September. May, thank you. May and September. So we have 2 times in our personnel manual that basically asks, the quorum court creates a personnel manual, and it says, all right, these 2 months, if you have a pay increase, these are the months to come, because historically, and years ago, every month was another committee, or excuse me, another elected official or another department coming and asking for money, and the quorum court just was ready to pull their hair out because they were tired of having constant requests. And so the decision was that we're going to have these 2 times, and if you come in May, then we'll make that, and if it passes, it becomes effective at the end of the May quorum court meeting, okay? And if you come in September, that those will be part of the budget process. So in September, they don't become, those pay increases wouldn't become active in September, but rather when we begin the budget process in December, we've got those numbers that we already agreed to in September, and we'll use that for the next year. This year's been a little bit different, and part of that is because we had elected officials that came in May, and the quorum court, we just had issues that we dealt with all the way up till last month, basically, until we got some of those approved. And then so now we're kind of dealing with a little bit of an odd request because the sheriff came in September and made some statements about wanting the pay request or the pay raises. And so here we are in November. So that's an odd, a little bit of an oddity, because in a perfect world, there would be 2 months that we would deal with this, or at least 2 months in personnel, May and September. Justice Rowland.
But are you opening up, so you just stated that in the past we do May, September, and one of the reasons why those 2 months were set was because the justices were pulling their hair out over different, maybe a ordinance asked for pay raises every month. So are we not creating the same situation? Because if we do this resolution today, could it happen next month, the next, between other departments? That's just something to think about.
I think that's something for the sheriff's office to answer, because
Well,
legally.
I mean, it's not just with the sheriff's office. I'm just mean with all. If they can do it, then everybody else can.
I
So
agree.
that's my concern.
I agree. My point is, I'm just telling you, our manual says 2 months. I think the sheriff's office had some reasons, and I'll let them go into it, but you're exactly correct, is that there is sort of a precedence that has been set this year by talking about pay increases quite a bit. And probably next year, and it's up to the quorum court on how we deal with that, but we might want to tighten that up a little bit to make sure that we're adhering to that, such that we're not dealing with it on a month-to-month basis.
I think the better question is, are we in violation of an ordinance if we keep passing it when it's not in the month that's specified?
And you are. I mean, you are violating your own rule when you take a pay request in months, or excuse me, you can take up a pay request whenever. The ordinance just says the elected official has to come in those 2 months. So if this committee decides they don't want to take up the pay request in September and they want to move it to October, you're not breaking a rule, because the elected officials done their job. You are under no obligation to decide in that same month. So where it becomes a violation is when you take something up in February, or you have elected officials come in February and ask for pay increases. That's where a possible violation could occur. Does that make sense, Justice Kendrick?
Clear as mud.
May I answer some of the questions?
Yes,
Or
yes,
so many?
yes.
Thank you. First off, the total of all full-time salaries currently, just salaries, is $5,827,244. That doesn't include change.
Would you repeat that number, please?
$5,24244. But I did not count the change, so it's not exact.
Did not count the what, I'm sorry?
Change,
Uh,
that's just a, yeah.
Yeah, I asked for a round number, so that's.
I'm
doing
trying to
above
be
the
very
call.
exact.
And okay, I'm gonna give it to a couple more quorum court members real quick, but just to clarify, we're not in any violation
Thank
tonight.
you.
That's correct. You're
Thank
not. Yes.
That's the other part I wanted to kind of answer, what Justice Allison and Justice Rowland were saying. We did come before the quorum court in September, which is what the ordinance states. We did not have a completed request at the time due to, honestly, the sheer volume of our payroll. I have 42 different positions and 170 employees. And so to do a salary survey and to get all Class 6 counties' job descriptions is a very sizable task, if you can't tell. And I can promise you, not only myself, but also other employees within our office worked as tirelessly as we could to get all of this data and present it to you based on the ordinance that was passed by personnel and quorum court. And in my belief, that's why we have talked about pay raises so much this year, is because of the push to have that ordinance passed. It's not necessarily because every department was coming before the quorum court every single month wanting raises as in past years. So it's a little bit different scenario. We did present data and we just didn't have the complete package as we did now. Our budget for 2022 has been turned in with these increased salaries on each of those line items for those employees. So we will not be increasing above what is on this resolution. That is what is on the actual budget request, is what's been turned into the county judge's office. So if this doesn't get approved, or if it gets passed to Budget and Finance wants to cut some of the different positions down or whatever, that would be a part of our budget cuts, within the budget discussion, just as any other line item would be. And I do feel like we have done exactly what is asked of us. Another department came before the court, the assessor's office came in October with her resolution. And the discussion wasn't this lengthy for hers because she doesn't have that many employees. And so that's the point that I would like to make, that I understand that this is a lot to take in because of the amount of money, but these are people, and they're just as deserving as those county employees in the assessor's office are.
Justice Higgins, would you still like to go?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Justice Rollins' question, because I think Justice Pickett and I were probably the ones here during that air polling situation a number of years ago. And really how we got here with the 2 times a year was because we would go through the budget process in November and December like we do now, and then it would seem in February that we would get an elected official come in and ask for a couple of raises. And, they would get legitimate raises, and they would have articulate a good justification. And then after we approved those in February, in March, another elected official would come in with 3 or 4 more requests, and then we would get into April, and it seemed as the year went along, they would get more brazen about the officials that said, well, you know what, those other 3 elected officials got their raises, I think I'll ask for mine. And that's how it got into every month. And so we spent a lot of time, months and months, talking about how could we bring these in so that we're not looking at these as a one-off, so that we're looking at them as a total for the budget purposes in it. And our thought process at the time was, let's primarily bring the raises request in the fall, in the September period, and let's go through those, and that way we can look at them and have all of them at one time, not one-off. And then that originally was only going to be 1 time a year. And then as we went through that process, we realized, you know what, there are some one-offs that the budget process may not catch. So let's allow the spring opportunity to pick up the 1 and 2 offs. And so that was the thought process in this. And this goes back, I don't know, Justice Pickett, 7 or 8 years ago that we brought this up. And I would say that overall, that process has served us well. It's not perfect, but it served us pretty well. It's certainly better than having 4 or 5 a month come through. And then, as Willie just mentioned, and then the sheriff's department would come in here with the largest payroll and ask, for theirs. And so we certainly wanted to include the other departments as well. So I just wanted to provide a little color as to how we got where we are.
Oh, thank you, Justice Higgins. Okay, out of fairness to the sheriff's office and the department, I'd like to wrap up the discussion on the process and get back to the resolution. So if there's any last questions about the process, I'll go ahead and take them now. But we didn't talk about the process with the judge's resolution. So I think it's good to have the discussion, but I do want to be mindful and fair to the sheriff's office in their presentation here. So, Justice Allison, would you like to get a last question?
Maybe I missed something with the judge's resolution, or resolution you talked about with the assessor's office, whatever. This is the first time I remember seeing a resolution enacted by a committee, and that's what I'm questioning right now. I'm not questioning your numbers. I'm not questioning your raise request. I agree with you. You submitted this a long time ago, and I wish it would have moved a lot faster for you all the way from the very start. But what I'm questioning is, this is the first time I've seen a resolution come forward, a committee that had a committee sign off it, where it said be enacted by the committee and not the entire court. That's what's worrying.
Can we get an explanation? Just a
minute, Justice Kendrick. Just a minute. Who is your question directed to, Justice Allison?
Well, whoever can.
I'm
new to this. I'm new to this.
Okay. I'm gonna yield the floor to Phil. Looks like you have something to say.
If please the court, I think a committee can only talk to the full court in 3 ways: motions, resolution, ordinance. That's the only 3 that's designated by statute. An ordinance is a definitive piece of legislation that says exactly here's what money, here's when, all that. Okay. The problem, as Margaret stated earlier, by creating an ordinance that is started in personnel and goes to budget finance, is twofold. One, this committee doesn't determine the appropriation; it just determines the scale or the band that an employee is paid at. So that's one issue. The second issue is ordinarily when we have a payroll or appropriation, we are amending the budget to reflect that. Well, we don't have a budget today for 2022. So that was my decision, or excuse me, my recommendation is to use resolution as opposed to ordinance. And it doesn't necessarily need to be signed by everybody. It is simply a way to talk to the Budget and Finance Committee formally. We could also do it by motion. The problem is if we did it by motion, it's not written down. And so some might accuse us of not being transparent because we're simply stating a motion, second voting on here. This gives the people of Faulkner County a way to see what's gone on in the Personnel Committee. So a motion would be appropriate, no problem with that. A resolution also would be appropriate. It just gives us a written documentation to know what went on. Ordinance would probably not be appropriate at this time because we don't have a budget to amend yet.
And just, I could just a moment. And didn't we already do some of these resolutions?
We have.
We
Yeah,
did
so-
last month with no explanation. I mean.
Right,
There was no
but
explanation.
just a minute, just Kendrick, I'll give you the floor, I promise. The other departments that we did these for, do you recall? The other ones, so this isn't, my point is this isn't the first time.
And it's not the first time, even last month wasn't the first time. Every year at this time, it gets complicated because y'all want ordinances and you can't have an ordinance at this point.
Because we don't have a
Because
budget
you don't have a
ordinance.
budget to amend.
That's all.
And it gets complicated every year, and it's been done a little different every year for the 11 years I've been here. But Philip and I discussed it, and he thought this was the better route to go. It's open and transparent, and all it does is state y'all's wishes, and then it goes into the budgeting process for 2022.
Fair, just Kendrick.
So, Mr. Murphy, you said that we were setting pay bands.
That's correct.
Is that correct? How can we set a pay band with a resolution? A resolution is not, it's a statement, right? It's not legally binding. It's not a proposed ordinance. It's not an ordinance. So how is a resolution actually set a pay band?
Yeah.
Other than being a recommendation, does it actually set a pay band?
That's a fair question. And part of that goes to, we don't have a definitive pay schedule here in Faulkner County. Other counties do. Faulkner County doesn't. So perhaps in the future, if this committee wants to talk about creating an actual ordinance that goes through and every employee has a structured scale, we could do that, but we don't have that mechanism at this point in Faulkner County. So the issue you raised is a valid concern. You're right. It's not binding, meaning it's not binding on the Budget and Finance Committee to take the resolution and use that same rate. However, the Budget and Finance Committee, by rules that we've established, I mean the quorum court has established, is not to set or not to decide the issue of whether or not a job is worthy of a certain pay. That's this committee's role. So if they were to have an issue and say, well, we think that the assessor deserves to be paid at a higher rate, they don't have the ability to just do that. That needs to come to the personnel to decide whether or not that function is worthy of a higher band. And the truth is, could we do an ordinance at some point that completely adopts the pay bands or scales? Yes, we could. We just don't have one in place right now.
Okay, so we're not setting a pay band. So realistically, since we're not setting a pay band, this is nothing more than a recommendation that the Budget and Finance can either, they can shoot under it, they can shoot over it. It doesn't bind them in any way other than just saying, hey, we think, look at this amendment.
Well, I think our personnel manual says that, I mean,
you just said we weren't set, I mean, we can't set a pay band legally by a resolution, so this is not,
right.
am I misunderstanding?
But the only misstatement is that the Budget and Finance Committee doesn't have the ability to exceed the authority of the Personnel Committee. So your statement was they can shoot over, under, and the Budget and Finance Committee cannot appropriate money in excess of what the Personnel Committee has decided.
But we haven't decided, we've just sent them a recommendation.
It's a resolution, there's a common misperception that it's not binding. A resolution is a binding statement. There's it has force and effect. We do resolutions when we send things to the election office to get things on the ballot. A resolution isn't worthless. It still is a statement. I
didn't say it was worthless, but it's not setting a payment, like a proposed resolution. I understand the issues with the budget process and that, but a proposed resolution is nothing more than proposed. It's not binding, but it is a legal document, whereas this is, you're not setting a payment. It just seems muddy.
Good. Any other questions from the committee for Ms. Woolley? Just will remind the committee that our purpose is to discuss whether this committee feels these positions should be recognized for these raised amounts. Not whether the money is there, but conversation happens next.
Justice, may I say something?
Yes.
And I know I've said this, and I probably sound like a broken record, but just I'm asking this committee to keep in mind, we are the 5th largest county in the state of Arkansas, and we are at the very top of the largest Class 6 counties. We're grossly underpaid compared to all the other Class 6 counties. This just gets us up to that. And so it's my prayer, my hope that this committee will at least understand that all we're trying to do is get to where I can retain officers, I can hire officers. They want to come to work here because at least we're somewhat equivalent to all the other Class 6 counties, so that we can attract them, draw them, and retain them here. And that's my purpose. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you. Angie, you have something else you want to add?
Yes, thank you. I understand that this, the size of this, I mean, it's 15 pages. I typed it. I know exactly what you mean when it says that it can appear muddy, but it was not muddy last month with the assessor's office. And it was a resolution, and it was written exactly the same format because I actually used it as an example to draft our own. So I don't want people to imply that this is muddy or that we are not doing this the right way or anything like that. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I promise you that we're doing this based on the ordinance that was approved by quorum court to request raises, and we're doing this based on how the county clerk and our county attorney has advised us to do so. We're not trying to not be transparent. I promise you, every time I come before this court, I'm as transparent as possibly can be. Anytime anybody's ever asked me to email them anything or give any kind of information, I know myself and anyone from our sheriff's office tries to do so. So please just understand that I understand that this is a lot of information, but it's just based on the fact that we're trying to include every one of our full-time employees. The sheriff is not included in this. He has excluded himself from this. So this is everybody underneath the sheriff. And also, there's one other thing I was going to say and I forgot it. The last time that I can recall that a department-wide raise request has come through was when Sheriff Chalk was our sheriff. And the way that process went was nothing like what it is now. So this, that task I know was large for the individual that was in charge at the time, and I took over after that. So I was not a part of that bulk raise request, but I believe that was in 2015. So the last time this has happened has been many years ago. So please just be understanding that I know it's a lot, but we're trying to do this the right way and handle it the right way.
I would just like to make one comment. Thank you, Ms. Willie, for the homework. I know that takes a lot of time to look at the averages of the Class 6 counties, and you presented that in a way that we were able to go and look at that. And it still takes a long time to go through that, but thank you. So that's all I have.
Okay. Any other discussion from the committee? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this the first resolution just dealing with the 911 PSAP positions. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution does pass. Sorry, Justice Higgins, are you still with us? Guess not. Guess he gave up. So last item on our agenda would be the second part of this raise request for the sheriff's office. I'll go ahead and bring it to the table. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think
Okay.
so.
I make a motion we approve, this resolution as well.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution does pass. Any other business before the committee? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.